Guys, back again. It's another Sunday and it's really wet outside. It's been a really wet couple of weeks and we've only had a couple of sunny days in a little while. But it's nice and cozy and that's what I like anyway. So I'm quite happy with the rain. It's good. Anyway, I hope you guys are all doing okay. And yeah, I thought I would make this video because in my last one in the comments someone had said, you know, could I talk about kind of a bit about how this all started for me when I first started becoming eating disordered. So I thought that's what I'd address in this video. I'd also be quite interested to hear about if what I described with myself and how it started has happened to anyone else, because I do hear that, you know, most of the time you don't start out with an intention of making yourself sick or having some kind of mental illness or causing yourself a lot of you know, ongoing distress for the rest of your life. So it doesn't start out as a plan. You don't start out to have an eating disorder, rather, I guess. And for me, it didn't start out that way either. How it started for me was, or what I remember is, I mean, it was a moment in high school, and I had just gone to high school. I think I was in grade 8, or towards the end of grade 8, or towards the end of my first year of high school, and I think I was in a home economics class and we were talking about health and cooking and the usual sort of things, you know, it's cooking and sewing and health information. So we're in a class with that, and the teacher was talking about, you know, fats, carbohydrates and proteins and things like that. And I remember her saying, you know, we've got processed foods, we've got, you know, whole foods, we've got proteins, fats, carbohydrates, and you know, these are the things that are less healthy and these are the things that we should eat more of. So I remember that she mentioned, you know, lollies, chocolate, sausage rolls, packs of chips, things like that. And I remember, you know, the words quite fatty, quite salty, highly sugary, and those kind of words that were kind of thrown around in that class. And I remember thinking to myself, you know, because I grew up as a bit of a perfectionist. I think I've said that in a video before, but I was always trying to improve things and make anything I did work better. And so I was a perfectionist with everything, and when I started hearing this stuff, I remember thinking to myself, you know, I could do better. I could be healthier in what I choose to eat. And I remember at the time, I ate anything. I was always, you know, a smallish size person. I've never had a weight problem. So it wasn't as though I was coming from a place where I'd been fat and been teased or anything like that. And I know some people have been. For me, I just wanted to do better at the start. And I remember the first thing that I did was I thought, well, okay, fair enough, I will just start maybe cutting out, you know, the sausage rolls, you know, most days of the week that I would get at the tuck shop, and not bring packets of crisps or, you know, or buying chocolate milk all the time, which is what I used to do. I mean, I used to eat everything, and most of the time that was just all I liked. And so that was the first step. The other kind of, I guess, thing that I kind of found a little bit sad was that at 13 I hadn't really developed anything at all in terms of physically. I was completely flat-chested, but I had just gotten my first period. when all of this kind of went down. And ever since then, I think only one time I've ever had a period ever since then, which was when I'd been made to go into hospital and gain a whole bunch of weight again, and I think I got a period once or twice then. But apart from that, I've never had one since my first one at 13. The other thing about me as I was growing up, and up until this point, was that I did, apart from this whole kind of trigger with the home economics class, I had also been through a fair bit in my time. I mean, I had, in our family, there was a lot going on. There was a fair bit of trauma, and so I know that a lot of people say that, eating disorders are kind of a coping skill, and they're something that you use, or a lot of people use, so that they can find something in their world that they can control. Now, that could have been one of my issues, I don't know, but I do know that it didn't really feel that way. For me, it was more of a perfectionistic thing, and I was just trying to get better at doing something else. And but yeah, I guess in a way I can't kind of discount all of that other stuff that was going on in life, in my family. So I don't want to kind of just pretend that didn't have anything to do with things. I think it probably did in the way that I wanted to be a perfect person. I wanted to be a perfect child. It wasn't that I didn't get enough attention. I got as much attention as I needed from my parents and everything. So it wasn't anything to do with that. But in a way, I sort of feel as though I needed to be better. And I don't feel as though I was trying to control anything, because I didn't have any control. In fact, I knew I had control. There were things that I could do, and I could tend to food, and I could make that better. Anyway, so as time went on, I got to a point where I started cutting out more and more things. So I do remember, particularly, my mum would make my lunches every day, or part of it. I'd usually get tuck shop and things like that. But I'd started cutting out all my chocolate milk, sausage rolls, packets of chips, and lollies from the tuck shop, and I would just take along my sandwiches and my morning tea or something like that, whatever it might be. And I remember the time that Mum gave me a sandwich, and I remember asking her to leave out the meat. I don't want to eat meat anymore. Oh, I don't want it on my sandwiches. And I used to have things like, tuna or salmon on my sandwiches with a little bit of mayonnaise and things like that. And I'd always have butter, just, the normal thing that you do. You butter your bread and you put your filling in. I didn't want that anymore. I'd also heard that bananas were sugary, so that took out any bananas that I might have eaten. But I remember at first I would eat some of the bread. I would never eat all of it though. And then after that, I remember cutting out or scraping off any meat that I'd find in my sandwiches. And then I, eventually, of course, I asked Mum not to give me that. And so then there was that. And gradually I got to maybe an apple for the whole day at school. And then after that, I started losing a lot of weight already. But I remember after that, I eventually got down to the point where I ate a couple of bites of apple every day, and that was it. I think I drank a tiny bit of tea in the morning before school. That was it. And than the couple of bites of an apple. That's all I ate all day long. I'd also discovered that perhaps I could do even better if I exercised more. Now by this point, I'd had a lot of people comment on my body and how I looked and how much weight I'd lost. And instead of going, oh gosh, maybe I'm taking this a bit too far, I liked it. And I didn't really see it myself. I didn't really feel as though I'd lost much weight. I didn't see it myself. I can sort of tell now, but back then it didn't seem like anything had changed for me, looking in the mirror. But people were telling me that. And I kind of liked it. And I thought, well, that's, if I eventually get down to eating nothing, I'll have to be as thin as I can possibly be. It sounds kind of crazy, but I do hear that a lot of people start out this way. Anyway, as time went on, my mum and dad were really, really concerned about me, and so my mum spoke to me and said that could she take me to the doctor. And I guess I didn't have a lot of choice. I didn't want to go. I felt okay, but yeah, we ended up going. I went along, and the doctor had asked me about what I was eating, if I was exercising, all of those sort of things. And I remember I just told the truth, and she said, well, that's not enough food. You really need to eat more, and I really need to see you again and see how things are going. So if you can come back next week, I would like you to gain, of course, she'd weighed me as well, and I was significantly under what I probably should be. And she said, well, if you can come back next week, if you could just gain a little bit of weight, I think it might have been half a kilo that she was asking me. And I remember just thinking, no way, I'm not gaining anything. And she said, well, look, if you don't gain a little bit, then we're going to have to look into a hospitalisation. So even that didn't really scare me, because I just thought, well, no one's going to get me to eat anything. So I ended up not eating anything further, even though Mum kept on reminding me that we were going to go back and, she was going to weigh me again. Couldn't lose any more weight, but I don't know, for some reason that didn't really scare me. And so unfortunately, it ended up that I got, the doctor said to me, look, you've lost more weight and we're going to have to put you in hospital because this just can't go on. You're going to kill yourself. So she called the Royal Children's Hospital this was back in 1996, by the way. Things were very different back then. I think they're a little bit better now in terms of what people understand about people with eating disorders and what's going on with them. But back then, no, it was nothing like that. So I ended up being taken to the Royal Children's Hospital in Brisbane. I still remember a lot of stuff about that ward I went into. It was called Sega Ward because it was full of, what are they called? The Sega video games, whatever those are. I don't play video games. I never did, so I don't really know, but it was a Sega ward, and there was a lot of those sort of video game type of things that were there, so all the kids in the ward could play the Sega. When I got there, they checked me in, and I never forgot the next part. I was taken over to my bed, and I was in a room with a whole bunch of children. They weren't 13-year-olds. They were babies and toddlers. Maybe the oldest one could have been about 4 or something like that. So it was a very noisy room. There were parents around the ward and around that room, and it was in a big room at the end of the hallway, right near the nurse's station. And I was taken to that room, and that was where my first bed was, and I was told that I would have to stay in that room for about the first week so that they could see how I was going. And they said to me that I would be specialed, which means that I would have a nurse with me 24/7, and that nurse would have to watch me and make sure that I did what I was supposed to do, which meant that they would have to come into the toilet with me, because when they have a person who's been insorted, they don't know if you purge or anything like that. I hadn't even heard of purging by that stage. I didn't know, except just that I didn't eat. But so they have to watch you, and I had someone with me all the time from that point on. But so I said goodbye to my parents, and I was very angry with them, barely spoke to them after they admitted me. But yeah, then I had a nurse with me, and then the next thing was they took me down the hallway to a special room, and a number of nurses stood beside a bed, and I was put on that bed, and I was forced to swallow a nasogastric tube. So they put it in your nose, and then they tell you to swallow and swallow and swallow. It kind of helps it go down a lot easier, but it was horrific. And that is a trauma experience that it's never ever left my mind. It was probably one of the worst things that affected me for years to come. And it hurt. It really, really hurt putting that inside my nose and to swallow that down, and it does hurt your throat as well, quite a lot when you first get them. And that's the same as any time you have a tube down your throat. It hurts for a while. Eventually you kind of have to get used to it, and you can swallow other stuff too. But I was told that first they would use that tube for a couple of days. I wasn't able to eat anything at first, a couple of days, because they just want to make sure that your electrolytes and your phosphates are going to be okay, which is what they've done every admission that I've ever had that I've had a tube, which I think is about 3 times. And so they have to monitor that with blood tests and stuff like that. And then they decide whether or when you can start eating food. And so I would much rather eat than have a tube. I always have. And every time I've been given a tube and told I had to have it, I've always begged to be taken off it, and promised that I would eat and have supplements and all the rest of it, because it's a lot more pleasurable actually being able to eat and drink nice things, because anything from that point on has become a pleasure to me. I like food. I wish I could eat properly, normally, just like everyone else. I love food. But anyway, so yeah, I think it was probably a couple of days at least that I had to have the tube with nothing else. And they even monitor your fluid, your water intake and everything. You're not allowed to even drink more than a certain amount of water, which I think I might have talked about in my latest hospital admission videos. You get extremely thirsty, but you can't have anything. It's all through the tube. But after a couple of days, they said I would have to start eating. And I was scared. I was scared to start eating again, because I thought, well, you're putting this drink through my tube 24/7 at the moment. I don't want to risk eating food and then gaining even more weight, because I'd already started gaining weight. And this stuff that they put down the tubes is highly calorific, calorific, or is that the word? Calorically dense. And so I was scared to start eating, but in a way I was glad that I was kind of given permission. So they gave me breakfast cereal and fruit at breakfast time. At that point I hadn't discovered my favourite foods yet, but so I'd have to eat either cornflakes or rice bubbles or anything that I thought I could determine had the least calories at the time. Then you'd have to have a sandwich for lunch, and then you'd have to have a hot meal at dinner time. I think that was how it went. Anyway, after that, I remember that I'd see other young people around my age, and they would kind of drift down the hall at the meal times and things. And I remember thinking, gee, they're thin, and wondering who they were. And eventually I was put up in a room further up the corridor at the hospital, and I learned a lot there. I was put into a room in that ward with other 12, 13, 14-year-olds, and about 5 others of them were anorexic. There was also a girl who had cystic fibrosis as well, and she ended up dying soon after, but I met a few of them, and I'm still friends with one of them to this day, and I'm Facebook friends with another one too. I don't really talk to her, but I know who they are, and yeah, they're most of them today are fully recovered, fine, normal citizens, and there's only one of them who's still eating disordered, as far as I know, and although she's a lot healthier now. So once I met these other kids, I became quite attached, and I never knew other people had this problem that I had, and that was the first time that I'd ever met other people who had the same issues around food and fear of gaining weight and fear of food, I guess. But they understood, and that touched my heart in a lot of ways. And I also found out that every day they went to what they called the hospital school. It's a lot better and bigger now, our hospital school. They have them in most hospitals that cater to children, but back then it was just, a little group of us kids, and then we were taken up to another part of the hospital there was one room. You could do art and craft, or you could cut and paste, and you can even have your own school books if you got them. And you could sit around from around 10 o'clock till 2 o'clock, and you would do any of those sort of things. A lot of the kids, or the other anorexics at that time, they actually they used to just muck around doing whatever they wanted, so they weren't really doing schoolwork. But I remember asking my parents if they could get me some of my actual schoolwork so I could spend some time doing that. So I tried that. I was never very good at it. I was okay with the English, but yeah, when it came to the maths, I had a textbook and I wasn't sitting in on the lesson, so yeah, it didn't really go all that well. It didn't last very long, and I think, yeah, so I didn't end up sticking with doing my schoolwork. I tried to do some English and stuff like that, but apparently it wasn't long before the school said to me, or my parents, they said to my parents, look, not to worry, she's going to be gone a few weeks, and, she can start straight back next term and she'll be fine, not to worry about it. So, I got to the point where I thought, well, I'm just going to focus on enjoying myself as much as I can, and spending time with these other anorexics. I also remember that at that time there was a nurse, and I remember she was kind of had this funny this fun attitude towards us, as though, and she actually said this, she actually said to us when we're all gathered in one of our rooms, she said to us, you guys, all you guys have got to do is eat. There's nothing wrong with you. You should all be out of here living your lives and saving the beds for people who really need them. Yeah, and that was obviously meant to make us feel really guilty for being ill. And I don't like that kind of talk at all. It's not fair, and it's degrading, and it's just shows how little people knew back then. But we didn't deserve beds. We weren't sick, really. All we needed to do was eat a hamburger and we'd be fine. Save the beds for people with cystic fibrosis and all sorts of other childhood illnesses. So yeah, that was quite difficult. I remember one of us trying to explain to her, this is our illness. We can't just eat. We have a problem with that, and that's our own illness, and I'm sorry to understand, but that's how it is for us, and yeah, we are sick. But there was absolutely no acknowledgement of that at all at the time. Hey guys, it's another day. It's Tuesday, the new week, so yeah, I've just been at work this morning, and I didn't get to finish off and do a bit of an outro just the other day when I was starting to with my new video. So yeah, I just want to probably leave it there. It's already getting a bit long. I don't know if anyone will sit through it or want to bother, but yeah, it's just I thought I would just say goodbye, and I hope you guys are all gonna have a really good week, and I love you all, and thanks for listening.